Hello, and welcome to episode 84 of Prose. This week, watch a young woman embrace her wan and luminous superpowers, and enjoy a bit of a formal hello to Prose's new home base with one Mr. Walter Whitman. As you all can hear, things here at Prose are still in a bit of transition. Clearly, the studio isn't set up quite to the point that I'd like it to be, so I'm still on mobile equipment. Do forgive the ins and outs and awkward in-betweens with this particular recording process. I hope to have all the equipment set up in the next episode or two, so around episode 86, life should get back to normal for us all. Even so, I'm very excited about the tales that we'll be telling this week, and I did think it appropriate to toss in a very famous Brooklyn poet, since that is indeed the home base for the podcast now. As always, thank you all very much for going and supporting on Patreon. That is patreon.com/Prose podcast. I have several supporters doing some wonderful things for me, and I'd love for you to consider joining the Prose family and supporting the podcast. Moreover, it would rock if you would go and follow us on social media. We are at Prose Podcast on all forms of social media, although it's not as active as it probably should be because I'm off enjoying my summer like the rest of you. But still, I'd love to see you there and get some hellos. Even more importantly, it'd be great if you could go and rate or review Prose on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you choose to listen to podcasts. For easiest access to the show, do subscribe. And I guess that's it for now. So here amid all things transition, let me again say thank you for joining us. And let's get to the tales, shall we? This week, we have Madam Moonbeam and Crossing Brooklyn Ferry by Walt Whitman. Enjoy. Madam Moonbeam by Jared I. McGee. Allison was a moonbeam personified. At least, that is what she was told, rather often in fact. In her first hearings of this observation, she'd assumed the classification was hurtful, some pejorative means of knocking her down. The words were not meant to harm, however. They were not aimed with derision or malice. There was no pockmark or acne joke. There were no declarations of coolness or distancing herself. No. These were true compliments. They were easy compliments, as her skin shone coolly, even in the darkest of winter nights. She, in fact, was the color of the moon. Since she could remember, she'd been unable to get a tan. Allison never shunned the sunlight. In fact, she flocked to it, loving to bask in the baking rays, embracing the distant star as if she were a sister. No matter how much embracing she did, though, her skin remained the same silvery white it had always been. Tanning oils, accelerators, enhancers, fancy beds, spray-ons. No matter what route Allison tried to take, her skin was not having any coloring. Her hair was also the bright blonde that was so fair that it was easily mistaken for silver, and her light gray eyes with storm cloud gray around the irises only served to complete the look of a lunar goddess striding upon the earth. It took some time for her to figure out that her skin, when outside under the light of the real moon and her sister stars, actually glowed. Certainly, the output of light was not overwhelming. No, it was more of a soft, radiant halo that projected from all of Allison's exposed skin, almost as if it were reflecting the pale light being shone down from the night's lanterns out in the cosmos. Her unique trait, or was it a talent, did not go unnoticed by her family or her peers. Her family simply called it a blessing, saying she'd been kissed by the Queen of the Night, the bearer of the tides, one of the most ancient concepts of a god or goddess around. Her peers were a bit more standoffish. They could not as readily accept her difference, and it took Allison a great deal of time to build up enough trust to show anyone outside of her family, much less anyone she hoped to retain as a close friend or confidant. Still, over time, her confidence would build, and she would cobble together a close cabal of friends whom she trusted enough to show her true self. Late in the evening sometimes, Allison and her friends would sneak out into her backyard, safe from prying eyes by the enormous 8-foot wood plank fence her father had built just for her stargazing outings. And they would giggle and talk about boys and talk about homework and just generally be adolescent girls, there under the watchful eyes of her sisters in the sky. It wasn't until she was preparing to graduate that one such night arose where she wasn't in the safety of her backyard. 4 of her best friends had convinced Allison to go down to the rocky beach to go for a walk and see the nighttime fauna that frequented the waterfront and the little pools that filled up with the risen tide. Allison was nervous, but she was becoming an adult now. Soon, she'd be off on her own and would have to make these sorts of outings more frequently, and often, she projected, for more important reasons than to cavort around with her buddies. Her father and mother both told her that she was being quite mature and quite brave to step outside of her comfort zone, and they applauded her for her decision to finally throw a bit of caution to the wind and go outside in the unprotected night, even if it was just a couple miles down the road with the girls she'd known for most of her young life. While they were strolling down the beach that night, they came across a group of boys in a campfire. The boys were from a different high school up the road, and Allison thought she might have recognized a couple of them from her daytime stints at a server at the local Dairy Queen. She immediately felt nauseous and wanted to return the way they'd come, but her friends were determined to get some flirting in with these unexpected targets for seduction. So, Allison was stuck trying to make herself small on the fringes of the group and on the edges of the conversation. That was her mistake. Had she gone in a bit closer to the fire, the boys would have been none the wiser. She would have been seemingly demure and detached, and the light of the fire would have overwhelmed her faint moonish glow. Instead, she had pulled back away from the fire, and Allison's soft hum of light was apparent to anyone that would give her a second glance. Those second glances came in less than 5 minutes of conversation with the boys there on the beach. Wonderment and interest gave way to confusion, and then, as with all things born of ignorance, anger and distrust. Allison could not remember what precisely the boys said in their progression from curiosity to malintent, but she did know that their interactions went dark quickly. To their credit, Allison's friends stepped between her and the boys. They spoke up to her defense. They answered the unanswerable questions of why and how come and the like. They tried to form a barrier of safety for Allison as she began a slow, wary retreat toward the comfort and protection of her home and her parents. Unfortunately, the boys' desire for confrontation overtook them, and they quickly bullied their way past her friend wall and toward her, surrounding her and stopping her progress. There were 5 boys in total, the same number as there were girls. 3 of the 5 were buffeting her with questions, while the other 2 simply stood and gaped at her glowing. Her friends continued to try to dissuade the boys' current line of questioning and growing desire to touch Allison, but they shrugged the girls off and pushed the girls away with relative ease. Allison's mind reeled at this situation. This is why she did not go out like this. 1 minute quickly became 5, and that quickly became 10, each passing moment bolstering the boys' willingness to reach out and touch, to begin to handle her like she was some sort of odd crustacean they'd scooped up from the tidal pools there near the waterfront. just when she thought things were getting near a breaking point and going even darker, when she began to fear for her safety. Two of her friends had already run off toward her house, and the boys only had darker places to go from here. One of the two silent boys spoke up, silencing all those around her. "She's special. Can't you idiots see that? Be respectful, fuck." "I truly apologize, miss. We're just a bit surprised, that's all. Goddamn, I'm so sorry." With that, the three boys that had been pressing her shrunk back, looking admonished and remorseful, all three murmuring their apologies and looking like they'd had a spell broken, their eyes blinking largely as if they'd woken from a deep sleep, clearly confused at who they'd become in that moment. Allison couldn't believe it. What an odd effect she'd had on all of them, including this particular boy who seemed to be a leader of sorts all of a sudden. "Thank you for speaking up. I truly appreciate it.
Adam. My name is Adam, and you are?"
"I'm Allison, but yeah, honestly, I appreciate you saying something. Thank you." Awkward conversation turned into laughs and friendship. By the time Allison's two friends who'd run for help returned with Allison's father, everyone was gathered around the fire having a good time. He pulled her away, got her accounting of the situation, and then acquiesced that everything really was okay. Adam actually sidled up to their conversation as it began to die down and introduced himself to her father, apologizing for the boy's rudeness and seeming malice, including himself in that accounting. Allison's father was quite taken aback and seemed extremely relieved, shaking Adam's hand and heading back down the beach toward their house. As the night progressed and Allison became more comfortable, she realized she could glow brighter. To do so was simply like flexing a muscle. She glowed ever brighter, delighting her company and shrugging at the hows and whys as much as the others. She realized that when she did do this flexing, the tide surged closer and closer still. She realized the nocturnal animals that were out and about skittered toward her and called to her and seemed out and out drawn to her light, never coming at her aggressively, but more reverently and calm. Her friends and the new boys didn't seem to notice anything but the waxing light. Allison, though, she could feel the touch of the very powers of the cosmos rising up in her. This was something new. This was something more than a little bit of shimmering on a warm summer night in her backyard.
Madam Moonbeam! Oh, that would be an awesome superhero name for you, Allison, said Adam, grinning good-naturedly from the log right next to her. I would say Mademoiselle Moonbeam, but it just doesn't have the same ring to it, am I right? Mademoiselle Moonbeam. She just doesn't scare me as much as Madam Moonbeam sounds formidable. Oh, man.
Everyone around the fire heartily agreed with Adam, Allison included. She looked up to the moon hanging low in the sky and felt her heart skip a beat. This really was her sister, way up there, so far out into the vastness of the firmament. And tonight, she could feel the power of her lunar relative coursing through her. And Allison knew that something had changed there that night. Madam Moonbeam had indeed been born, and she looked quite forward to seeing what good she might do in this world beset in darkness. Thank you for listening to Madam Moonbeam, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. All music you hear comes from YouTube's wonderful music channel that is available to all creators and is being used under CC0 1.0 public domain dedication licenses. Please do stick around for the next offering this week. a tribute to Brooklyn, the new home base of Prose. And that's going to be via the wonderful Walt Whitman's amazing classic poem, Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. So stick around. Crossing Brooklyn Ferry by Walt Whitman. One. Flood tide below me. I see you face to face. Clouds of the west, sun there half an hour high. I see you also face to face. Crowds of men and women attired in the usual costumes. How curious you are to me. On the ferry boats, the hundreds and hundreds that cross, returning home, are more curious to me than you suppose. And you that shall cross from shore to shore years hence are more to me and more in my meditations than you might suppose. 2. The impalpable sustenance of me from all things at all hours of the day, the simple, compact, well-joined scheme, myself disintegrated, every one disintegrated yet part of the scheme, the similitudes of the past and those of the future, the glories strung like beads on my smallest nights and hearings, on the walk in the street and the passage over the river, the current rushing so swiftly and swimming with me far away, the others that are to follow me, the ties between me and them, the certainty of others, the life, love, sight, hearing of others. Others will enter the gates of the ferry and cross from shore to shore. Others will watch the run of the flood tide. Others will see the shipping of Manhattan north and west and the heights of Brooklyn to the south and east. Others will see the islands large and small. 50 years hence, others will see them as they cross, the sun half an hour high. 100 years hence, or even so many 100 years hence, others will see them, will enjoy the sunset, the pouring in of the flood tide, the falling back to the sea of the ebb tide. 3. It avails not, time nor place, distance avails not. I am with you, you men and women of a generation, or ever so many generations hence. Just as you feel when you look on the river and sky, so I felt. Just as any of you is one of a living crowd, I was one of a crowd. Just as you are refreshed by the gladness of the river and the bright flow, I was refreshed. Just as you stand and lean on the rail, yet hurry with the swift current, I stood yet was hurried. Just as you look on the numberless masts of ships and the thick-stemmed pipes of steamboats, I looked. I too, many and many a time, crossed the river of old, watched the 12th month seagulls, saw them high in the air floating with motionless wings, oscillating their bodies, saw how the glistening yellow lit up parts of their bodies and left the rest in strong shadow, saw the slow wheeling circles and the gradual edging toward the south, saw the reflection of the summer sky in the water, had my eyes dazzled by the shimmering track of beams, looked at the fine centrifugal spokes of light round the shape of my head in the sunlit water, looked on the haze on the hills southward and southwestward, looked on the vapor as it flew in fleeces tinged with violet, looked toward the lower bay to notice the vessels arriving, saw their approach, saw aboard those that were near me, saw the white sails of schooners and sloops, saw the ships at anchor, the sailors at work in the rigging or out astride the spars, the round masts, the swinging motion of the hulls, the slender serpentine pennants, the large and small steamers in motion, the pilots in their pilot houses, the white wake left by the passage, the quick, tremulous whirl of the wheels, the flags of all nations, the falling of them at sunset, the scallop-edged waves in the twilight, the ladled cups, the frolicsome crests and glistening, the stretch afar growing dimmer and dimmer, the gray walls of the granite storehouses by the docks. On the river, the shadowy group, the big steam tug closely flanked on each side by the barges, the hay boat, the belated lighter. On the neighboring shore, the fires from the foundry, chimneys burning high, glaringly into the night, casting their flicker of black contrasted with wild red and yellow light over the tops of houses and down into the clefts of the streets. 4. These and all else were to me the same as they are to you. I loved well those cities, loved well the stately and rapid river. The men and women I saw were all near to me, others the same, others who look back on me because I looked forward to them. The time will come, though, I stop here today and tonight. 5. What is it then between us? What is the count of the scores or hundreds of years between us? Whatever it is, it avails not. Distance avails not, and place avails not. I too lived. Brooklyn of ample hills was mine. I too walked the streets of Manhattan Island and bathed in the waters around it. I too felt a curious, abrupt questioning stir within me. In the day, among crowds of people, sometimes they came upon me. In my walks home late at night, or as I lay in my bed, they came upon me. I too had been struck from the float forever held in solution. I too had received identity by my body. That I knew was of my body, and what I should be, I knew I should be of my body. 6. It is not upon you alone the dark patches fall. The dark threw its patches down upon me also. The best I had done seemed to me blank and suspicious. My great thoughts, as I supposed them, were they not in reality meager? Nor is it you alone who know what it is to be evil. I am he who knew what it was to be evil. I too knitted the old knot of contrariety, blabbed, blushed, resented, lied, stole, grudged, had guile, anger, lust, hot wishes I dared not speak, was wayward, vain, greedy, shallow, sly, cowardly, malignant, the wolf, the snake, the hog, not wanting in me the cheating look, the frivolous word, the adulterous wish, not wanting refusals, hates, postponements, meanness, laziness, none of these wanting, was one with the rest, the days and haps of the rest, was called by my nighest name, by clear loud voices of young men as they saw me approaching or passing, felt their arms on my neck as I stood, or the negligent leaning of their flesh against me as I sat. Saw many I loved in the street or ferry boat or public assembly, yet never told them a word. Lived the same life with the rest, the same old laughing, gnawing, sleeping. Played the part that still looks back on the actor or actress, the same old role, the role that is what we make it, as great as we like, or as small as we like, or both great and small. 7. Closer yet I approach you. What thought you have of me now? I had as much of you. I laid in my stores in advance. I considered long and seriously of you before you were born. Who was to know what should come home to me? Who knows, but I am enjoying this. Who knows for all the distance, but I am as good as looking at you now, for all you cannot see me. 8. What can ever be more stately and admirable to me than mast him Manhattan, river and sunset and scallop-edged waves of flood tide, the seagulls oscillating their bodies, the hay boat in the twilight, and the belated lighter? What gods can exceed these that clasp me by the hand and with voices I love call me promptly and loudly by my nighest name as I approach? What is more subtle than this which ties me to the man or the woman that looks in my face, which fuses me into you now and pours my meaning into you? We understand then, do we not? That I promise without mentioning it, have you not accepted? What the study could not teach, what the preaching could not accomplish, is accomplished, is it not? 9. Flow on, river. Flow with the flood tide and ebb with the ebb tide. Frolic on, crested and scallop-edged waves. Gorgeous clouds of the sunset, drench with your splendor me or the men and women generations after me. Cross from shore to shore countless crowds of passengers. Stand up, tall masts of Manhattan. Stand up, beautiful hills of Brooklyn. Throb, baffled and curious brain. Throw out questions and answers. Suspend here and everywhere eternal float of solution. Gaze loving and thirsting eyes in the house or street or public assembly. Sound out, voices of young men. Loudly and musically call me by my nighest name. Live old life, play the part that looks back on the actor or actress. Play the old role, the role that is great or small according to what one makes it. Consider you who peruse me, whether I may not in unknown ways be looking upon you. Be firm, rail over the river, to support those who lean idly, yet haste with the hasting current. Fly on seabirds, fly sideways, or wheel in large circles high in the air. Receive the summer sky you water, and faithfully hold it till all downcast eyes have time to take it from you. Diverge fine spokes of light from the shape of my head or anyone's head in the sunlit water. Come on, ships from the lower bay, pass up or down, white-sailed schooners, sloops or lighters. Flaunt away, flags of all nations, be duly lowered at sunset. Burn high, you fires, foundry chimneys, cast black shadows at nightfall, cast red and yellow light over the tops of houses. Appearances, now or henceforth, indicate what you are. You necessary film continued to envelope the soul. About my body for me and your body for you be hung out divinest aromas. Thrive, cities. Bring your freight, bring your shows, ample and sufficient rivers. Expand, being, than which none else is perhaps more spiritual. Keep your places, objects, than which none else is more lasting. You have waited. You always wait, you dumb, beautiful ministers. We receive you with free sense at last, and are insatiate henceforward. Not you any more shall be able to foil us, or withhold yourselves from us. We use you and do not cast you aside. We plant you permanently within us. We fathom you not. We love you. There is perfection in you also. You furnish your parts towards eternity. Great or small, you furnish your parts toward the soul. Thank you for listening to Crossing Brooklyn Ferry by Walt Whitman. All music you hear in the background comes from YouTube's recently launched, wonderful compendium of music available for artists to use. This particular set of sounds is being used under CC 01.0 public domain dedication licenses. Well, that does it for Prose this week. It was a little different, and again, because we are in a time of transition and upheaval, the sound is a bit different than usual too. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed both the short story and this poem that really means a lot to me. It always has, but now as I myself stride the hills of Brooklyn on a daily basis, it shakes me just a little more. I hope that you will consider supporting the show on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Prose podcast. And I definitely want to hear from anyone and everyone through social media at Prose Podcast across platforms. Lastly, do subscribe to the show using the podcast catcher of your choice, and do leave ratings and reviews. That really helps me know what you think of the show and helps others find the show. I can't wait to see you all in 2 weeks' time and to share in some more tales. Until then, love those around you. Tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is, always stranger than fiction. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you next time.